like to welcome everybody back to the Genesis Ag podcast for today, and we're here with a very special guest, Phillip Davis, owner and founder of Genesis Ag. There's a round of applause for you, Phillip. So, Phillip, one of the things that I admire about your job, what you get to do, is you get to interact with people from all around the country. We all have a tendency to get locked into our own little world, our own little sphere, and we don't have a chance to really see the broader picture as much as maybe we would like to. I know in our part of the world, planting conditions this year were not far from ideal. I mean, you could always ask for better, but we didn't have the challenges that we had last year, that everyone seemed to have last year. Have you had a good feel for what everybody has experienced this year? Has it overall been a decent planting window, a terrible planting window? Where were some of those spots at, the good and the bad? Where are guys at compared to normal? What can we expect from this season's? What kind of yields can we expect based on this year's growing season?
Here's what I've heard, Mike, that guys have telling me with the travel restrictions and everything that went on this spring. I was somewhat limited because I didn't want to come driving up in a guy's yard and him go running the other way like we've experienced even on some of the streets here in the really populated places. And I went into an auto dealership the other day to get an oil change, and the service manager, of course, had his mask on and everything. And so even if you've got your mask on, if you move within that 6 foot zone, he would step back. And he did that to everyone in the whole dealership, whether they had a mask on or not. So he was very conscious of that 6 foot buffer that he wanted to maintain, and that's fine. So my contact with a lot of people has been somewhat limited. So in talking to people that I'm working with, I've heard stories of a lot of area in Iowa was almost perfect. They got things in a timely fashion, but then they couldn't get any rain. So they were, when I say the emergence, was a little bit stressed if they didn't get it down into good moisture. But as I'm hearing from them right now, everything is really good. Then you jump into Illinois. Well, it's been a mixed bag. Some guys got planted really good conditions, really good shape, and then other parts have been too wet. Same thing in Indiana, over into Ohio. It's been a mixed bag. Some guys are perfect, some guys are good enough, and some guys are marginal. In Nebraska, when we get out around Grand Island, we're hearing that they're having to irrigate really early in this cycle for them. And they would say, we just like to have a good rain, because they had to activate their chemistry with irrigation water, had to water the crop up, a lot of different things that's having experience. But then you get into the Delta, you get into even around the Missouri River as it comes down through Kansas, Nebraska. Some of those guys have had some challenges with weather. You get on down into the Delta. When I say Arkansas, you get into Louisiana, Mississippi. Those guys have had some challenges. And when it takes you 6 weeks to get your corn crop planted, Mike, that's not good.
What do you mean?
And when I say that large of a window when you start to you actually get your acres planted, it's not like you're planting 100,000 acres of corn, but it just takes that long because of all the weather challenges. Then yourself, if you get that early moisture stress in excess of too much, which you probably don't experience out there, but too much moisture and then at cool temperatures, that crop does not function well. And so a great portion of our production needs heat units right now.
Okay.
We're coming in, this will be the last week in May. We're coming into the 1st of June here. We need heat units. Everyone I talk to says we're behind. We're behind. We're behind. Some of our Genesis A consultants that we work with have called me and said, we're showing that we're at 325 GDUs, but the crop appearance, the stage of the crop shows we're about 260. It's not growing. We're not growing biomass. We're not growing that plant because it's been in that I've just got to survive. It's too cool to really generate a lot of glucose, a lot of energy in the plant through photosynthesis. It's too cool. I'm not getting those really good heat units, so I'm just going to exist. And I think that's in a lot of areas. If we look at the GDU calculator versus the staging of that crop, it's probably going to be a little bit different, probably more different this year than it has been in several years.
So what I'm hearing is there's not a straight GDU conversion. There's like a lack of efficiency this year. The temperature isn't equating the way it normally would.
Well, I think, Mike, it's been so cool for so long. Typically, you want to plant a corn crop and you want to have a really good stand in 10 days. I've been hearing stories that it's took 21 days to get that stand established. We don't like that. A corn crop doesn't like that if it's going to try to reach its full potential. When I say use that much energy, burn that much energy up in this germination cycle, burn that much energy out of the seed to get it out and get it out of the ground. And I think that's what we've experienced. And I think by using that, we don't have that energy from that spiking stage to maybe that 250, 275 GDUs, that we don't have that reserve left in that seed that we normally do. So I think that's one thing. Two, when we look at someone told me the other day, their average GDUs over the last 7 days had been less than 9 per day. So you're not generating a lot of energy during those. So it's non-typical.
So if we're generating 9 GDUs a day, this is a dumb question, granted, but how many GDUs go into just keeping the plant alive in the normal course of things? It takes whatever it takes, 1,200 calories a day just to make our brains function. I'm sure there's a GDU equivalent to that in a corn plant. Can you put any kind of a goofball number on that? Is it anything after 5 GDUs starts going into excess production to actually build the plant past survival, or is there such a number?
It's a great question, Mike. You've stimulated me to try to research and find that. Just off the cuff, the guy that was monitoring that really closely and said, they've been getting 9, it just seemed like the plant was pretty stalled. So you may be very close at that 5 to 6 GDUs to just maintain that plant. That'd be a great question. I'll have to ask a really good plant pathologist what that number could be.
Well, great. Now you put me on the spot. You said, just praised me with a great question. Now I don't have anything even close to that. But if I was going to follow up a great question with a mediocre one, you made the comment earlier about it's taking 45 days, 6 weeks to plant a crop, and that's not good. What would your ideal window be if Phillip Davis had to put a number on how long it takes to get planted? How long should that take?
My experience in all the producers that I've worked with, when I go to a farm and that crop has been planted 10 days and we don't have 100% emergence, that crop will never reach its full potential. So really, I'm not as worried about how extended my planting window becomes because of the weather, I'm more concerned about the window of when the seed goes into the ground until I get 100% emergence. That to me is more critical. So I know that some of this early planting in that 6-week cycle, when I say it went into a stall, it did because they got so much rain, so much moisture, cooler temperatures, very limited GDUs that they got a stand, but it took a long time to get that stand. That's my deal. I had rather if we all knew that we could get planted in a 10-day window, but when does that 10-day window start for us?
Right.
That would be ideal to get planted in that 10-day window, and then everything could be picture perfect, so to speak. But you got to have that GDUs. You got to be generating those to get that young seedling established, to get that energy to going into that plant cycle.
What's the best way that we could help prop up our young plants when they're going into stress with cool, with damp, with wet? We're having a lack of energy going into them that they can convert. What can we do to help make their life a little easier? Is having banded fertility, does that help? Obviously, sunlight we have no control over. Having a nice clean seed furrow where more heat is generated, having more trash to help insulate the heat or keep the heat from escaping in the evening. What's the practice wise, what can we do as farmers to help our plants?
Well, you mentioned one thing there, having that the nutrient load close to the seed. I like it kind of away from the seed, about that 2 to some guys have it out 4 or 5 inches away. But I do like that banding aspect of a certain nutrient load there, so that energy is close to that seed, not necessarily on the seed, but close to it. I like that. Providing an energy source for that seed, yes, to get that moving, get that established. So some of the things that we do as in our work, Mike, and we work closely with you on some of this technology, is getting as much energy in the seed as we can, getting energy close to that seed, and whether that, if you want to call that 2x2, what have you, that's going to help carry that plant. But what we're experiencing now, almost when I say production wide, the whole production area of the U.S., is we're not getting GDUs, we're not getting heat units, we're not getting, so that plant, when I say is somewhat lacking in energy, it's not being able to produce. We're supposed to get 10 straight cloudy days here in North Carolina. We've got potential of getting rain for the next 10 days. Even after we've just received 14 on our farm, we've got the potential the next 10 days of receiving some rainfall, very limited sunshine. So I would encourage my guys, if they were experiencing something like this, your Vitamin carbos, to go out if you can get over it. Now, we can't get over our crop now because it's so wet, but just as soon as that window opens and presents itself, we're going to be foliar feeding our crop.
Okay.
And it's not to the 275 to 350 GDUs where we would go in with a microboom, but we're going to be out there with Vitamin and carbos. We're going to be stimulating that young plant. So we're not saying it's artificial sunlight, but we are creating energy in that young seedling. And I figure for the cost of that product, I'm sure we're going to get a return. Then we're actually going to set that plant up to come right back with a microboom. So I'm concerned about getting energy into this new young plant with it being under so much stress.
So do you think that the Vita Intera and Carbos, the energy that's created in the plant or that's put into the plant with those, Is that similar to sunlight, the energy that sunlight would provide, or obviously there's some differences? And can you expound on that a little bit, what those differences and similarities could be?
Well, there's definitely differences in it, Mike, but when we've took a refractometer and we've put Bionterra and Carbos out there, and we see the Brix number in that plant elevate within 30 minutes after we've applied that, how's that happening? How's that stimulating that plant that it's building and increasing energy in a 30-minute time period? And we've done that with sunlight. We've done that with no sunlight or on a cloudy day. I can't say there's no sunlight, but it was a cloudy day. So we've been able to do that with those two components. And so you're asking me how it does that. It just imbibes into the tissue of that plant. And so that plant recognizes it as energy. And I think what it does, it's much like you and I maybe going to get a B12 shot or something like that, or drinking a rock star or whatever it may be. It gives us that stimulation that, hey, I've got a little jolt of energy.
So is there any sort of, obviously we can do those after the fact. Is there anything we can do at planting to help with the energy production later on in the season? So if a guy doesn't have a sprayer or something like that, where he can't get in after the fact, any way just to create more energy that's available, increase that pool besides the banding of the fertilizer?
Well, I think if you got an in-furrow application, Mike, of working with some biology and working with the proper biology. I know in your alkaline soils out there that biology is a challenge. Finding the right biology is a challenge. I think that we're working through that with you, but yes, there are certain components that you can put in that furrow that as that young seedling germinates, and they're going to start colonizing on the roots of that young plant. So yes, it will help it season long to create energy, to make nutrients more available, and build a healthier plant.